Hello everyone and welcome to the second part of the project. My name is Mafaz Jawad and in this video I'll be installing OSCommerce and also implementing failover for two systems. Let's start. OSCommerce is an open source e-commerce system written in PHP language. This system is used for online store management and can be implemented on any web server, Apache or IIS. Our OSCommerce implementation consists of two layers, IIS web server and MySQL database. The following is the hardware configuration for our virtual machine. For software requirements, we need to install IIS web server, MySQL, and phpMyAdmin to monitor our database. Now let's start with the installation. First step is to add web server role. As for phpMyAdmin, we need to extract the files and copy them to the localhost directory. As for MySQL, we run the installer, pick the custom setup, choose our product, specify port number, root password and admin account, and install. Now we're going to run the OSCommerce, which is going to open a web-based installation page. But first we're going to open phpMyAdmin page and create a new database for the store. Now we go to OSCommerce installation page, specify our database server and database name. Wait until the database is imported. And we continue by adding store name and other required information. This is our store information as displayed. We click continue and our website is up. And now with the features. As an admin, you can open orders page and have an overview of recent orders details. You can also get statistics based on the recent revenue too. Admin's panel allow communication with customers through emails. Instead of having to open email website, an admin can open their administrator panel and send emails to customers. You can also specify taxes for specific locations. For example, we'll add the recent 5% VAT for Bahrain. We also customize the store with our own logo. As for the users, they can easily create an account using the following steps. They can easily navigate to the product they'd like to purchase, add it to the bag, check the order details and confirm. One last feature is the search engine. Users can look up keywords and find products they'd like to purchase. We're finally done with the last system. Now we'll be implementing high availability for two systems, SharePoint and OSCommerce. For this purpose, two network diagrams were created to implement two fault-tolerant systems. As displayed in the diagrams, each cluster was connected through a private switch. And now let's start with SharePoint network load balance. First step after implementing the network is to add an LB feature on both nodes. Next step is to open LB Manager, create a new cluster, specify a name, choose the designated IP address, specify priority, and confirm the IP address. Configure the cluster IP address. Add the second server as a host to the cluster. And now we wait till both hosts are converged. As for the last step, we go back to the ADDS, open up the DNS manager, and add a new host. For testing, we shut down the first server, open a web browser, and enter our URL. Now that we're done with NLB for SharePoint, we'll be implementing failover. First step is to add these features for both nodes. Second step is to create virtual desks using iSCSI. We will specify name, size, and create a target for the virtual desk. Here we will specify the server names Give them access for the virtual disk. Here we will be repeating the exact same steps for the second virtual hard disk. Here we'll be adding target IP address using SKZ initiator. Then we will connect it to the targets created earlier and auto-configure. Now we'll go ahead and open the disk management in server 1. We'll first bring the disks online and create 2 simple disks. Then we head to server 2, open disk management and refresh it. The disks are now available for both servers. One more thing we have to do before creating the cluster is to validate it. We specify names for both servers and validate them. Now we can finally create the cluster. We determine a name and an IP address for the cluster. Our cluster has been created. After the failover cluster has been created in the Windows server, we should start by installing the SQL cluster too. We choose New SQL Server Failover Cluster Installation, choose the Database Engine Services, specify a network name for our cluster, and also a name for the instance, give it an IP address, add the SQL service account. When the SQL cluster is finally installed, a new role will be added to the failover cluster. Last step is to open server 2, run Microsoft SQL, confirm the cluster instance name, IP address, service accounts, and to confirm the installation, the SQL server role has been added to server. Last step is to open server 2, run Microsoft SQL, confirm the cluster instance name, IP address, service accounts, and to confirm the installation, the SQL server role has been added to server. We will start first with network load balance. We'll first start by adding an NLB feature for both servers. Then we go to server 1, open NLB manager. Right-click, create new cluster, add your first server and the IP address, confirm the IP address and the priority, then IP address for the cluster. Add a website. Click finish. And now we will add the second host to the cluster. We add its name, IP address, the priority. Click finish. Then we go back to DNS and NADDS and create a new host for our website. For testing, we shut down the first virtual machine, open a web server, click our new host, and our website will be up. Run with MySQL failover. The first step will be to install MySQL on the second server, using the exact same steps from the beginning of the video. For the failover cluster, we will use a software called SafeKit to create a cluster in server 1 and add the second node to it from there. Once it's installed, it will open a page for you to configure the cluster from. We'll start off by giving a name for the cluster. Add your first node IP address and confirm. After this, you'll be redirected to deployment page, where the first node is already added with the IP address and the name of the computer. We'll click New Node and add the second node with the IP address and the computer name. We click the floppy disk and save. Both nodes have been successfully added to the cluster. And now for the configuration, we will choose MySQL module. Here we will confirm the computer's names and the IP addresses and click Validate. And in this page, we will add a virtual IP address for the cluster, and also a port number 2. Now that we have finally added the parameters for the cluster, we can apply the configuration on the nodes. The cluster configuration has run successfully on both nodes. We now click Next and Finish. The next page shows us that one node is up. We have to wait until it gets ready. Now that both nodes are up, our OSCommerce database can rely on the second node when the first node fails, making it highly available for the users. Finally, I'll be reflecting on some challenges I faced along my approach towards the project. I created a new network for my systems, and the subnetting wasn't correct at first. To overcome this, I googled network fundamentals and created a new network diagram. And to make sure I got it right, I showed it to a network expert. When I found out that the IP addresses were valid, I configured all the network with them. But the other problem was that there were no pings. After troubleshooting for several hours, it turned out I have to disable the Windows firewall to enable the servers to communicate with one another. The second was a logistics problem. Implementing my project in university servers required me to stay for extra hours in university in order to finish it, because I couldn't work at home. Looking up for empty classes every time was a problem, but I overcome it by checking each lab timetable beforehand. The last problem was changing my third system. I worked for a whole week to implement virtual commerce system, but I didn't seem to be overcoming the problem. And to prevent losing any extra time, I've looked up an alternative e-commerce system, which is OSCommerce, that I have implemented in the beginning of the video. And that is it for my system administration project. Thank you for watching.